The mining colony on the edge of the Shadra Nebula was a harsh and lonely place. Dust clouds drifted across the barren surface, and jagged rocks jutted from the ground like broken teeth. The colony itself was little more than a cluster of metal buildings and cages, glowing dimly under the twin suns. Among the many inhabitants, one presence went almost unnoticed, chained in a small enclosure that smelled of metal and old oil. Lyra, the young alien girl, sat quietly on the floor of her cage, her long, slender limbs folded under her. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim lights, and her eyes, wide and bright, reflected a sharp intelligence that the traders around her rarely recognized. From the day she had been brought here, her life had been nothing but isolation. The chain around her ankle bit into her skin whenever she moved, a constant reminder of her captivity. She had grown up learning silence. The traders did not allow her to speak except when giving responses to commands, and even then, only in the broken language they had forced her to mimic. Yet Lyra's mind remained sharp. She remembered the skies of her home world, the colors of its sunsets, and the gentle hum of its forests. Those memories were her treasure, hidden deep inside her as she endured the monotony and cruelty of the colony. Every day, the cage door would clang open, and a new human or alien visitor would walk past, inspecting her as if she were nothing more than an exhibit. They would speak in loud voices, laugh, and mock her small size or strange appearance. Lyra had learned not to flinch, to make herself small and silent, to become invisible in the eyes of those who saw her only as a possession. But on this particular day, the air felt different. A ship descended through the dust clouds, kicking up a storm of fine particles. It moved with precision, unlike the clumsy freighters that usually arrived. Lyra watched with cautious curiosity, her head tilted slightly as the ship landed. From the ramp of the ship emerged a human, tall and confident, yet moving with a careful awareness of his surroundings. He did not laugh, he did not shout, and he certainly did not come to gawk at her. His name was Ethan, and he had come to the colony on a mission that combined research, diplomacy, and secretly, rescue. He had heard rumors of alien captives being held in the remote sectors of the galaxy and had volunteered to investigate. When he walked past the cages, his eyes scanned carefully, not with the hunger of a collector, but with the thoughtfulness of someone seeking truth. When Ethan's gaze fell on Lyra, something unspoken passed between them. He saw not a pet, not a prize, but a being trapped unfairly, someone whose intelligence and spirit had been underestimated. Lyra, in turn, recognized the difference. This human did not radiate the usual mixture of fear, greed, or cruelty. His presence was steady, calm, and somehow safe. Days passed. Ethan returned to her enclosure repeatedly, never forcing interaction, never startling her. He began to speak softly from outside her cage, asking questions she could not answer at first, using gestures and small symbols to communicate. Lyra watched him carefully, assessing whether he was a threat. Over time, she began to respond, first with subtle nods or shakes of her head, then with small hand signals she had learned from observing the human's movements. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt a spark of connection. She began to share simple thoughts with him, her favorite memories of the forests of her home planet, the way the stars looked at night, and the small joys she had once known. Ethan listened with patience, taking careful notes, not for profit, but to understand her, to know her story. Life in the enclosure continued to be harsh. The trader was ruthless, and his employees were cruel. Some days were colder than others, the twin suns hidden behind thick dust storms. Food was sparse and often stale, water barely enough to drink. Lyra endured it all with a quiet dignity, clinging to the small hope that one day her chains would break. Ethan, however, was determined to give her that chance. He studied the layout of the colony, memorized the schedules of the guards, and examined the security systems. Every night, he returned to her cage, whispering ideas of freedom, teaching her small tricks to evade attention. Lyra absorbed every lesson, her mind and body preparing for something she had never imagined possible: escape. One evening, as the colony's twin suns set behind jagged mountains casting long shadows across the ground, Ethan approached Lyra with a small device in his hand. It was a key to her chains, disguised as part of the security system. He showed it to her, and for the first time, she touched it herself. The metal felt cold, but in her hands it symbolized hope, freedom, and the first step toward a life beyond captivity. "Do you trust me?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice carrying the weight of seriousness. Lyra hesitated. Trust was foreign to her. It had always been a dangerous risk, but looking into his calm, steady eyes, she nodded once. That single gesture was a declaration. She was willing to take a leap into the unknown. The plan for her escape was simple but risky. Ethan would disable the perimeter alarms and distract the guards while Lyra unlocked her chains. They had rehearsed the sequence in their minds, timing every step carefully. Yet no plan could fully account for the unpredictability of the colony, the alertness of the traitor, or the dangers lurking in the harsh terrain beyond the walls. The night of the escape arrived. A heavy dust storm rolled across the colony, providing the cover they needed. Ethan moved silently through the corridors, planting small devices to jam cameras and alarms. Lyra, her heart pounding, listened for his signals, feeling the chains around her ankle more acutely than ever. When the moment came, she used the device to release her chains, the metal clattering to the floor with a sound that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Freedom was immediate and overwhelming. Lyra could stretch her legs fully for the first time in years, feel the rough ground under her feet without restraint, and move without constant pressure. She followed Ethan through the corridors, their movements synchronized, every step a test of courage and trust. The colony was alive with danger. Guards shouted when alarms briefly triggered, and automated drones moved to intercept them. Lyra's instincts, sharpened by years of captivity, guided her. She dodged, ducked, and ran with precision, surprising even Ethan with her agility and sharp senses. Every action reinforced her confidence. Every narrow escape strengthened her determination to survive. Finally, they reached the outer perimeter, where the harsh, open terrain of the planet awaited. The dust storm obscured their movements, and Ethan led her through the jagged rocks, keeping low and moving swiftly. Lyra's lungs burned, her legs ached, but she felt alive in a way she never had before. The sky stretched endlessly above them, a canvas of stars that promised possibilities she had only dreamed of. When they reached a safe distance, Ethan paused and turned to her. "You did this," he said quietly. "You freed yourself. I just helped." His words carried no arrogance, only truth and respect. Lyra looked at him, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. For the first time, she realized that her life was hers to shape, and that the chains that had bound her spirit had no hold on her anymore. As dawn approached, casting pale light across the jagged landscape, Lyra and Ethan settled behind a rock outcrop to rest. The world seemed enormous and terrifying, yet full of promise. Lyra gazed at the horizon, imagining the planets and civilizations beyond the nebula, knowing that her journey had just begun. For Ethan, the mission was more than a rescue. It had become a partnership, a bond forged in trust, courage, and mutual respect. He understood that Lyra was not a victim, but a survivor, a being whose strength had been underestimated for too long. Their journey would be difficult, and danger would always be near, but together they were unstoppable. Night turned to morning, and the first rays of sunlight touched the metallic surface of the distant colony. Lyra felt a surge of freedom, the weight of years of captivity lifting with each breath. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. The traitor would pursue them, rival factions might try to capture her, and the unforgiving environment of the planet would test their limits. But she also knew something stronger than fear had awakened in her: hope. The first part of Lyra's story ended not with the certainty of victory, but with the exhilaration of choice. She could run, hide, explore, and learn. She could redefine her life beyond the chains, beyond the cage, beyond the cruelty that had defined her existence, and she would not do it alone. Ethan was with her, a human who had shown her the meaning of trust, respect, and courage. Together, they would face whatever dangers the universe held. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly alive, and the galaxy, with all its mysteries and wonders, awaited her. The rocky terrain stretched endlessly before Lyra and Ethan, a harsh landscape of jagged stones, deep crevices, and shifting dust. The twin suns had fully risen, casting pale light that made every shadow sharp and dangerous. Lyra's feet ached from running, but her heart beat with a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had been chained for most of her life, and now she was free, running across a planet where every step reminded her of the strength that had always been inside her. Ethan led her carefully, using his knowledge of the terrain to find the safest paths. He watched her closely, noticing her movements, quick, precise, and filled with caution. He had expected someone fragile, perhaps timid, but Lyra moved with the skill of someone who had learned to survive through observation and cleverness. She was strong, not just physically, but in ways that mattered even more: resilient, intelligent, and brave. They moved silently, stopping only when a faint sound indicated that someone might be following them. Dust swirled in the air, carried by sudden gusts of wind, masking their movements. Lyra's ears twitched, picking up sounds that Ethan could barely hear. She guided them around unstable cliffs and through narrow gaps, showing that even in captivity, her mind had remained sharp. As they navigated the rugged landscape, Ethan began to talk to her, not as a rescuer, but as a companion. He asked her questions about her home world, about her family, about the life she had lived before the chains. Lyra answered cautiously, her voice soft and hesitant at first, then growing stronger with each word. She spoke of forests that glowed in the night, rivers that shimmered under alien moons, and skies that stretched wider than any human could imagine. Ethan listened intently, fascinated not only by her stories, but by the way she saw the universe. Her perspective was unlike anything he had known. Where humans saw danger, she saw opportunity. Where humans saw empty space, she saw a canvas for hope and imagination. Their conversation became a bridge between two species, two worlds, and two lives that had been shaped by very different experiences. Hours passed as they moved toward a safe location Ethan had identified, a small plateau with a clear view of the horizon and natural cover from any pursuers. The climb was difficult, the rocks slippery, and the thin air made every breath a struggle. Yet Lyra never complained. She focused on the path, on staying balanced and on moving forward. Ethan admired her determination, realizing that freedom was more than a physical state. It was a mindset, one that Lyra had embraced fully. At the plateau, they rested briefly. Lyra drank from a small stream, her fingers trembling as she touched the cool water. Ethan watched her, silently acknowledging the significance of this simple act. For years, she had been denied even the most basic freedoms, and now she could drink, move, and breathe without restriction. It was a moment of triumph. Small but profound. They did not stay long. The traitor would not give up easily, and there were others in the colony who might try to capture Lyra for their own purposes. Ethan had prepared for this, But he also knew that plans could fail. They needed to keep moving, stay unpredictable, and rely on Lyra's instincts as much as his own knowledge. As they descended from the plateau, a distant sound reached their ears, a low hum of engines, the unmistakable noise of ships taking off. The traitor had sent a small squadron after them. Lyra's body tensed, ready to flee or defend herself, and Ethan placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "We can handle this," he said. "Stay close, trust me." They moved quickly, using the rocky terrain as cover. Lyra's agility amazed Ethan. She leapt over crevices, ducked under low-hanging rocks, and used her hands to grasp unstable ledges with a grip that seemed almost superhuman. She was no longer the fragile, timid girl he had first seen. She was a partner, a warrior in her own right. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow canyon that Ethan had identified as a temporary safe zone. The walls rose high on either side, shielding them from sight. They crouched behind a rock formation, catching their breath. Lyra's eyes shone with excitement and determination. "We're almost free," she whispered, her voice carrying a mix of hope and defiance. Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Almost," he said. "But freedom isn't just about leaving a cage. It's about living without fear, and that will take more than running. We'll need allies, a plan, and time." Lyra listened carefully, absorbing every word. For the first time, she felt like someone truly believed in her, not as a pet or a captive, but as an equal. She wanted to contribute, to help plan, and to prove that she was more than her past. Together they worked through strategies, discussing the safest routes to the human outpost several kilometers away, avoiding patrols and finding the best times to move. The night came, and with it, a strange beauty. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky a deep indigo filled with stars. Lyra paused to look up, her heart swelling with wonder. She had dreamed of this moment for years, and now it was real. The vastness of the universe no longer seemed distant or frightening. It felt like a place where she could belong, where her life could have meaning beyond captivity. Their journey continued under the cover of darkness. Ethan taught Lyra to recognize alien signals, to read the signs of approaching danger, and to move silently when needed. She absorbed every lesson, her confidence growing with each step. She began to take initiative, pointing out paths, spotting hazards, and even devising small tricks to avoid detection. Days passed in a blur of movement, danger, and discovery. Lyra's body grew stronger, her senses sharper, and her mind more confident. She began to imagine a life beyond the immediate escape. A life where she could explore, learn, and perhaps even help others who were trapped like she once had been. During one particularly tense moment, they encountered a patrol of the traitors' drones. Ethan signaled Lyra to stay low, but she surprised him by taking the lead. Using her agility and instincts, she moved ahead, creating diversions and leading the drones away from their path. Ethan watched in awe as she manipulated the environment, showing creativity and courage that went far beyond anything he had expected. After the danger passed, they reached the outskirts of a dense forest, a rare patch of greenery in an otherwise barren landscape. Lyra paused, touching the leaves gently, feeling their softness against her skin. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan smiled, understanding that for her, beauty had always been a symbol of freedom, a reminder of the worlds she had lost, and the ones she had yet to discover. Finally, after several more days of careful travel, they arrived at the human outpost. The sight of the buildings, the lights, and the signs of civilization filled Lyra with a mixture of relief and wonder. She had escaped her chains, evaded capture, and survived the harsh journey. Yet more importantly, She had grown into herself, a being capable of courage, intelligence, and leadership. Ethan introduced Lyra to the outpost's inhabitants, explaining her story carefully and emphasizing her strengths. The humans welcomed her with respect and curiosity, treating her as an equal rather than a curiosity. Lyra felt a warmth she had never known, the feeling of acceptance, understanding, and community. Over the next few weeks, Lyra began to adapt to her new life. She explored the outpost, learned about human culture, and shared her own knowledge of the galaxy. Her bond with Ethan deepened, built on trust, mutual respect, and shared experiences. They became partners in every sense, supporting each other, learning from each other, and preparing for the future together. Lyra also began to mentor other alien refugees who had been rescued or had escaped captivity. She taught them survival skills, how to trust, and how to reclaim their own strength. Her past experiences, once a source of pain, became a source of guidance and inspiration for others. She was no longer just a survivor, she was a leader, a symbol of resilience and hope. One day, as Lyra and Ethan stood on a platform overlooking the forest beyond the outpost, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the chains, the cage, and the long years of solitude. She remembered the fear, the pain, and the uncertainty. But she also remembered the spark that Ethan had ignited, the courage that had always been inside her, and the vast possibilities of the universe. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said quietly, her eyes shining. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling. "You earned it," he said. "You earned every moment of freedom, every chance to live, and every opportunity to make a difference." Lyra looked out at the horizon, where the first light of dawn touched the treetops. She felt a sense of purpose, a drive to explore, learn, and grow. Her chains were gone, but more importantly, the chains on her spirit were broken. She had discovered the true meaning of freedom, not just escaping captivity, but claiming her life fully, embracing her potential, and stepping boldly into the universe. The story of Lyra's first journey ended not with the finality of victory, but with the promise of beginnings. There would be challenges ahead, enemies who still sought to control her, worlds filled with danger, and the ongoing task of understanding the galaxy and her place in it. Yet she faced the future not as a captive, but as a free being, confident in her strength, her intelligence, and her ability to make a difference. Ethan and Lyra stood together, looking out at the stars. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and mysterious, filled with possibilities they could only imagine. They had come far, survived much, and yet their journey was only beginning. And in that moment, Lyra understood something profound. Freedom was not given. It was taken, fought for, and cherished. She had taken it, and she would never let it go. With the rising suns casting golden light across the outpost, Lyra smiled, feeling the first true warmth of hope and belonging. The universe awaited, and she was ready.